Okay, so good day, my dear BM, or what you call the Applied Economics class. So our discussion today will be regarding on the concept of the supply. The ending of our preliminary topics will actually ended up on the demand concept. Now let's proceed to what we call the supply concept, or this was the side of your producers. Now, in a certain market, we know that there must be an interaction between the demanders and the suppliers itself, or in other words, the consumers and the buyers. Now, the buyers will now be represented by your demand side, while the suppliers will be represented by the supply side. Now, when we say supply, this is actually the behavior of the different producers or the different sellers when it comes to making their products available to the consumers itself. So as it is defined on our slide here, supply is defined as the maximum units or quantity of goods or services producers can offer. So meaning this is the amount that a producer could actually produce at their willingness and their ability. Remember, a supply will never be considered a supply if the producers are not willing or if the producers are not capable of doing that. Kagaya din po ng demand. Ang demand, hindi masasabing demand yun pag nasabi natin, maraming taong may gusto ng product na yun, so mataas ang demand. No, it cannot be. A demand could only considered to be a demand if those people are willing and able to buy them. Same is true with the concept of your supply. If a certain producers is willing or producers are willing to produce the product and are capable of producing them, then there will be a supply itself. Okay. Now, the supply, in order for us to further understand the supply concept, is we could actually see them through a supply schedule and in a supply curve itself. Yeah. But take note, a supply and then the quantity of supply here is different from one another, because the supply is the concept, or this is actually the behavior of the different uh, yung mga napakaraming suppliers natin at their ability and their willingness to produce the good. While the quantity supplied, this actually refers to the amount that a producer is willing and able to produce at a certain price. So maybe a producer is willing and capable to produce milk, soap, or clothings, but how much quantity does it produce, or how much amount does it produce from those different kinds of goods, then that is considered to be your quantity supply. Okay? Ganyan po. Now, this supply could actually be explained through your supply schedule, wherein a supply schedule is just a table that shows to you the different amount of goods that you are willing to produce with a different price that could be what do you call this one, imposed to those products itself. Okay, so this is an example of your what do you call this one, supply schedule. It is just a table that shows the different prices and the different quantities that we could actually produce. Now, put yourself as a producer, not anymore as a consumers. Okay? Ganyan. So, look at the table itself. As a producer, are you going to produce or sell more product if the prices of the product is low? You are going to sell or produce less. But if it is going to increase, the prices is going to increase and increase and increase, then that means you're going to sell more and more or produce more and more. See? So that's how we are going to behave when it comes to the relationship of our price and the quantities that we're going to supply itself. Okay? Yan. Another one is the supply curve. Now, the supply curve is actually explains to us the law of supply. What is the law of supply? The law of supply explains to us that as the price of the certain product in the market increases, the suppliers are going to supply more and more. Or as price increases, quantity supplied increases. And as price decreases, quantity supplied decreases. That is simply your law of demand. Okay, we are always comparing in the supply concept, we are always comparing the price and the quantity. Okay? Wherein, if the price of the product increases, quantity supply increases also. But if the price decreases, then quantity supply also decreases. That is what we call the law of your supply itself. Okay? Now, look at the supply. It is an upward sloping curve. Okay? Why is it an upward sloping curve? Let's go back to the price and the quantity. If the price is increasing, quantity is increasing. So remember, if the price of the product is 2 pesos, quantity is 60 units. But if the price increases from 2 pesos to 8 pesos, then the quantity will become 1. Well, let's become 90 here. Okay? And if the price goes to 10 pesos, then the quantity will have to become 100 itself. So that means the supply curve is an upward sloping because of the positive relationship of our price and the quantity supply. Positive relationship because by looking at just the arrow there, it simply means kung saan pumupunta yung isa, susunod at susunod yung isa. Ganun po yun. Okay? Yan. So, that is how the law of supply works. So, if you're going to compare it to your demand, remember in your demand naman, downward sloping yon. Kasi po, negative yung relationship ng dalawa. Pag yung presyo tumataas at sa consumer, bibili ka ba ng marami? Hindi, syempre. Ganon, diba? So, that is the reason also why the supply curve, as demand curve is a downward sloping. Yan. Next is we have, of course, let's see some examples or how to solve and interpret our own supply. Now, since on the demand one, demand concept, we have also the function. So, dito naman, ang function, basically the function of our supply is this one. The quantity supply, which is equivalent to C plus DP, wherein the C here represents us the intercept of the function. Pag intercept, ibig sabihin, ito yung value pag yung variable price ay nagiging 0. The D here naman is the slope of the function. Slope in the sense na ito yung value ng isang product pag nag-change yung isa. Okay? So, ganun po yon. Now, sa pagsosolve ng ating function, we always have to solve only 2 variables and leave the 2 variables unknown itself. Now, on the demand, as it is stated on your learning materials, the first thing that you have to solve is the D1. Susunod po yung C, or the y-intercept. Actually, this is the slope, and then the C is considered with autonomous value. Kung bakit siya autonomous, it represents the maximum or the minimum value. Okay? Sa supply, it is considered to be the minimum value that they're going to produce. In the demand, it is considered to be the maximum value that they want to consume. Ganyan. So, those are the differences between the supply and the demand. So, we already pointed out 2 differences. Yung upward sloping curves ng supply at saka yung downward sloping curve ng ating demand. Next is, of course, the autonomous value or the intercept value. In the supply, it is considered to be minimum, while in the demand, it is considered to be maximum. Okay? And so, how are we going to solve the slope of the line? Ito po siya. Now, in solving, we always have to write the base formula because the base formula will always be the basis on how are you going to proceed further. At saka, when it comes to a certain person checking your own ways of solving the problem, they always have to take note, what base formula did they use? So then sooner or later, they will now know how did you arrive at your answer. Because there are some people who uses this different base formula, tapos yung sagot nila is tama. Wala pong ganun. Okay? So, in here, always write the base formula, which is this one. Now, if you're going to extend the base formula, it will look like this, wherein quantity supply 2 less quantity supply 1 divided by the price 2 less the price 1. Okay? Substitute the value. So, how are we going to arrive? Use the different givens on our table. So, we have from price 2 to 10, and then the quantity supplied from 10 to 42. So, you may choose anything from the table. Okay? As long as you never interchange their partners. So from 2, you have to choose the 10. So if you, for example, in here, no, quantity supply 2 less quantity supply 1. So I may choose 2 and 4. So alin dyan ang 2 ko, alin dyan ang 1 ko. Pwedeng ito yung 2, pwedeng ito naman yung 1. Or pwede rin po na ito ang 1, ito yung 2. Okay lang po na nagpapalit sila. Huwag lang pagpalitin yung pares. So pag ginawa mo itong 2, ito yung 1, so that means price, quantity supply 2 is the 10. Ilagay mo doon yung 10. Tapos, yung 1, quantity supply 1 is 18. So, ilagay natin dito ng 18. Ano yung presyo ng 10? 2. So, ilagay mo sa baba ng 10 yung 2. At yung 18, presyo niya ay 4. Ilagay natin doon sa baba niya yung 4. Ganun po siya. Okay? So, in here, ang ginamit natin is, we have the 34 units and then the 26 units. So, therefore, 34 is the quantity 2 and 26 is the quantity 1. So, ano yung pares ng 34 is 8. So, yun yung nasa baba niya. Pares ng 26 na 6, ito naman yung nasa baba niya. So, therefore, we have a slope which is considered to be 4. Okay? Now, how do we interpret this slope is very important. But do not forget that in solving, solve for the D. That is the first one to find. Next is solve for the C concept. Then sunod is solve natin yung once you solved it here, once you solve the D functions and then the C, then pwede natin i-substitute para meron tayong function itself. Now look at this one. Once it solved the 4, substitute mo lang sa formula doon. And then, kumuha ka ng any values sa table natin ulit. At i-substitute mo sa ating function. So, quantity supply, ginamit niya yung 10. C, leave it blank, plus 4, plus times the 2, which is the price of the 10. And we have here the C, or the autonomous value as the 2. Ito yung pinakamababang amount na pwedeng i-produce ng ating mga supplier pag ang presyo ng product nila ay magiging free or magiging 0. Okay? Ganyan po yan. Once na nakompleto natin yung dalawa, then we could substitute it into the function and we have already your supply function. Okay? There. So, take note that the atoms on the table shows the quantities are actually increasing by 8 units while the price is actually increasing by 2 pesos. So, that means as the price increases by 2 pesos, quantity increases by 8 pesos. Okay? Ganyan po yun. So, ito po yung 8 all over 2 na yon. But if you're going to simplify that, it became 4. So, anong ibig sabihin ng 4 na yon? Pag yung 8 over 2 na to is ito yon. Okay? So, the 4 here means that as the price of the product increases by 1 peso, quantity will have to increase by 4 pesos. Because automatically, ang denominator nito is 1. Okay, so that's how you interpret them. Don't forget, interpretation is very important. Okay, so let's proceed. Solving or determining the unknown values. Now, take note that the functions can actually be interchanged. Pwede mo rin paglaruan ang ating function. Pwede kang gumawa ng iyong formula out of the function, but do not violate the theory of the function. Linear function always deals with two variable factors. You may interchange, you may make your own. Pwede kang gumawa ng iyong formula. Pwede naman po yun. Out of the linear theory. Okay? So, huwag mong i-violate lang yun. You will always arrive at the right answer. But in making your own formula, take note that there are always factors also na kailangan nating gawin. Okay? Ganyan po. So, here, with the given functions, how are we going to deal with the prices or quantities if there are sudden changes? And then, of course, in here, we could actually manipulate the function so that we could derive the expected values. Kasi, hindi naman po lagi na pag na-solve na natin ang ating function, automatically, by means of that, malalaman natin kung ito yung presyo ng product, ito yung quantity ng product. Paano pag biglang changes? Na for example, wala sa table na nakikita natin yung changes na yan. So, how are we going to determine them? So, there are different ways how to use your own two functions. The slope function, which is the first one, and then the second one is the supply function, na kung saan nandun na po yung slope function sa ating supply function. Okay, so first, what if the amount of goods to be produced suddenly change? So how do we derive them? Well, once na na-solve natin ang supply change, paano natin ma-determine yung mga changes sa ating amounts na goods, or how amounts of goods? Yes, how do we determine the changes in the goods? The amount of goods also. How do we determine the changes in the price? And the values in the changes of the price itself. Okay, so first is how to deal with them. So we have here our function that we have solved. Quantity supply, which is 2 plus 4, 2, meaning 2 units as the minimum and 4 as the slope, and of course the two variables, which is the supply and the price. If, for example, the price of the product is 50, what is the quantity? Simply by substituting the price to the functions that we have, then we could actually determine the value of the product itself. Napakadali yan. So, pag ganito yung question natin, if the price of the product is 50 pesos, what is the quantity that the producers would supply? Then automatically, you are going to use the supply function and just substitute the value to the variables na nandun sa function natin. At makukuha natin yung amount. So that means, if the price of the product that is available in the market is 50 pesos, the different suppliers will going to supply 202 units. Okay? Now, if the quantity decreases to 30 units, what made it change? Look at the question. The quantity decreases to 30 units. What made it change? So that means, we are, parang estimation ito. Kasi sabi niya, yung quantity daw na nag-decrease sa 30. Nag-decrease siya from what amount? Nag-decrease siya from 90 to 30, from 100 to 30, from 60 to 30 ba? So, paano natin siya ma-determine? Anong function or anong formula ang gagamitin ko? Is it the quantity supply function, or yung slope function na change in quantity supply divided by the change in the price? Ano ba yung formula ang gagamitin natin? So, in here, we could still use the quantity supply function. Okay? By means of that, yan. Kasi sabi naman dito, yung problem is, nag-decrease yung amount to 30. From what amount? Wala naman tayong, that is supposedly an estimation. Pero dito, tinutukoy lang, ano kaya ang dahilan para siya mag-change? So, in doing that, you could use actually the supply function. Just substitute it, and then you will arrive at your answer, which is the price. That means, the quantity decreases to 30 units because the price changes to 7 pesos. Okay, to 7 pesos. Remember to put it that to. Do not say by. Kasi pag sinabi mong the quantity decreases to 30 units because of the change made by the price by 7, then ibig sabihin, mali yun. Mali yung sagot mo. Kahit na by the formula, nakuha mo yung 7, tapos yung interpretation mo, sinabi mo by 7, then you made your point mistake. Kasi hindi naman siya kada 7 pesos nag-change siya ang quantity natin ng 30. Which in fact, sa question natin sabi doon, nag-decrease lang po siya sa 30. Hindi siya nag-change ng tig 30. Ganun po yan. Okay? So, take note when it comes to interpreting your own questions. Okay? So, that means it decreases to 30 units because the price became 7 pesos. What about in terms of price changes, price decrease or price increase? Now, the same thing. If there is just a decrease or an increase in the price, the formula that you're going to use is the slope. I'm not the slope. It is the supply function. Okay? So that means, what if the changes is brought by the prices of the product, or biglang price suddenly change? Okay? So in this case, you will just substitute kasi bigla siyang tumaas, bigla siyang bumaba. Hindi naman siya nagbumababa ng tig 13 or bumababa siya ng ganun. Okay? So first, the price increases to 13 pesos. What then is the quantity at that price? So simply by using the function, substitute the given, and you will arrive at the amount of the quantity supply, which is 54. Okay, another one. If the quantity from 200 units decreases to 80 units, what is the price at that unit? Okay, so ano yung, from the question itself, ang tinatanong is, what daw is the price of 80 units? Okay, so don't be confused by, since we have two variables, parang there is a change. Yes, there is actually a change. From 200 units to 80 units, there is actually a change, a decrease of 100, decrease by 120. Okay, hindi siya nag-decrease to 120. Kasi pag nag-decrease to 120, that means the unit supposedly 120. But it decreases by 120. So that means it became 80. Okay, so in that case, what would be the price of that 80 units? Again, using this function, the supply function. Here is the supply function. Substitute the 200 to the P. Sorry, substitute the, what do you call this one? The quantity to the Q. Okay, substitute the quantity 80 to the Q there so that you could derive the price. Then, there. Transpose to the other side. Once you substitute it, magkaparehas lang po yung 80 at saka yung 2. So, dapat mag-transpose tayo. 80 minus 2, 4P. And we have here the price of the product, which is 19.5. That means 19.5 is the price of the 80 units. Okay, so that is how to solve for, or how to manipulate your own functions itself. Okay, now what about if the changes is not actually exactly a change, exactly a decrease to or an increase to, or it exactly became 100 or exactly became a 50, but it made the changes only by a certain amount. So what could be the change? What could be the functions, or how could we actually solve them? That is also already using your slope formula. Okay, if the changes brought by changes either the prices or the quantity, pero it made a changes by 2 at a little percentage levels, then we are going to solve them using the slope formula. So let's say given a supply function, example, quantity supply is equivalent to 10 plus 2p. Okay, now the problem is, what if the price changes by 3 pesos? That means yung price is hindi exactly 3 pesos. Ang sinasabi doon, ang price daw is nag-change ng 3 pesos. So what is the effect on the quantity supplied? So in this case, hindi mo pwedeng gamitin yung itong function, or substitute mo lang yung 3 pesos doon. But since we are dealing with the change, now go back to the slope function, which is this one. Okay, that is actually supposedly a B kasi nasa supply tayo. Okay, wherein the triangle here refers to the changes. Ito yon, changes by. The triangle here refers to the changes by. So you have to use the slope formula itself. So by means of that, now write the given. So what are the given? Ang given dito is change in quantity supply, change ng price, at saka yung value ng slope natin. Okay, the value of our slope. Sorry po sa ating linya. There. So the change in the quantity supply is unknown. Kasi yun yung nasa question. Okay, what is the effect on the quantity being supplied? The change in the price, it is already indicated on the question, which is by 3. So in the question, it never mentioned if there is an increase or a decrease. So automatically, we assume that the 3 pesos is positive. So that is at 3 pesos. How about the slope? Go back to the slope function. Okay, the slope the supply function, wherein it is considered to be 10 plus 2p. And then the 2 here is considered to be the slope, so the slope is 2 itself. So in that case, substitute it dito. If you want to substitute it, ang magiging labas is ganyan. The D here is the 2, quantity supply is unknown, which we are going to solve, and the change in price is 3. So next thing is cross multiply. So by means of cross multiplying, you will arrive at this point. So the change in the quantity supply is 6. That means if the price changes by 3 pesos, its effect on the quantity being supplied is 6 units. Okay? Or let's say as the price changes by 3 pesos, quantity supply changes by 6 units. Ganun po. Okay? So in these cases, remember, when it comes to using the slope formula and then the supply function, substitution lang po pag supply function ang ginagamit natin. Same is true with the slope formula, but when are you going to use them is you have to analyze the question itself. Okay? Yan. So next thing is, let's say, if there is a changes in the quantity naman. What about if the quantity changes by 15 units? What brought the change? Okay, so we are already referring to the changes. Maraming beses na na-mention ng change na yan. So automatically, we know that we are going to use already the slope formula. So in that case, okay, write your own function. Next is what formula you're going to use. And then determine the given. Okay, so what are the given again? So the change in quantity supply is considered to be 15 units. While the change in price is unknown. And then, of course, your supply slope is considered to be 2. So, by means of determining the given already, substitute it to the function, and you will have that. Once you substitute it to the function, cross-multiply, and you will have that value. Change in price times the 2 is equivalent to 15 units. Wherein, since ang hinahanap natin is the change in price, so that means we have to divide it by 2 to eliminate the 2 here. So therefore, we have here the change in price, which is 7. What does this mean? It means that quantity changed by 15 units due to the change in price by 5 pesos, 7.5 pesos. Okay, so be clear about the uses of the supply function and then the slope function. Same true with your demand. Kailan natin pwedeng gamitin yung demand function at saka kailan natin pwedeng gamitin ang slope function. Okay, so that depends on your ability already to analyze the question itself. Next is we have the combination of your supply in the demand function, which is the market equilibrium. Market equilibrium is a very an objective that everybody in the market would want to obtain or attain. But the problem is that, especially in reality, it never happens. Why? Because the behavior of the consumers is different to that of the producers. A consumer would always want to obtain its satisfaction. Same is true with the supply. Pero there are, when it comes to the two, there are different ways when it comes to obtaining them. Which in fact sa market, the very own determinant that affects their decision is the price itself. Which in fact sa price, magkaiba pa ang kanilang opinion. Mas gusto ng consumer ang mababang presyo. Mas gusto naman ni producer ang mataas na presyo. So, kailanman ang hirap abutin ang tinatawag natin na market equilibrium. But that is a very promising goal that every market institutions or even a certain economy would want to obtain. Because at a market equilibrium, there is already a satisfaction or a balance between and among the different players in the market itself. Okay? There. So, what is the equilibrium? Take note, an equilibrium happens only if quantity demand is equivalent to quantity supply, not demand is equivalent to supply. Because if you're going to look at the graph, there, diba? The graph, this is the supply curve and this is the demand curve. Kailanman hindi sila magiging parehas kasi they will be always opposite with one another. Ang demand is pababa while the supply is pataas itself. So in that case, they will never meet. So in a certain equilibrium, demand will never equivalent to supply, but actually quantity demand is equivalent to quantity supply here. There will be almost a certain portion in a certain market wherein quantity supply will always be equivalent to quantity demand. And that is the portion that will satisfy both the suppliers and the demanders itself. Okay? What makes the quantity demand and the quantity supply be equal with one another? If there is a price clearing price. Okay, or a market clearing price. That's why it is considered to be a market clearing price, because it clears the inequalities between the demand and the supply through their quantities. At nagkaparehas na sila, and we have already your what we call the equilibrium. Okay? Ganyan po. So let's see how are we going to solve our own market equilibrium. Okay, or how to determine our market equilibrium. In determining our market equilibrium is that we always have to find first the market clearing price. Ba? Importante kasi ang market clearing price. Bakit kaya importante yon? Kasi po, it will clear what are those factors that will make the supply and the demand unsatisfied with one another. So we have to make one price actually to clarify them. Okay, there. So in determining or solving the market equilibrium, we have to take note both the demand side and the supply side itself. So let's say, for example, here given as a demand function and then a supply function, which is this one. Okay, take note, a demand function is always a negative ang kanyang sign doon, while the supply is positive. Bakit kaya ganun? Which in fact sa ating formula is yung pinaka general formula niyan is A plus BP. So, paano po naging negative yon? Which in fact, on the general formula, it is positive. Because the slope of the demand function is negative. So, therefore, pag negative yon, ano yon? Kailangan, syempre, a negative times a positive will always be a negative. So, it is a negative. Okay? Ganyan. So, if we have already the demand function and the supply function, the next thing is you have to substitute it on how to determine your market equilibrium. Here is the formula. By just equating the demand function uh, and the quantity supply function, we have here, substitute it. Ano yung quantity demand function? Substitute mo doon. Ano yung quantity supply function? Substitute natin doon. This is the demand function, and this is the supply ones. Okay? So in that case, we have to transpose and pair those who are at the same values. Ayan. So therefore, negative 5p, there's 3p here, we have to transpose it to the other side. It will become a negative 3p. Now here, 12 units minus the 36 units, which will be transposed to the other side. So that is negative 5 minus negative 3p. Negative 5 minus 3p will become how much? It will become negative 8p, and 12 minus 36 will become negative 24. We are looking for the market clearing price. We have to eliminate the negative 8. Therefore, the market clearing price is 3. Okay? The next thing that you're going to solve after solving that is substitute it here by equating it again as this one. So if you're going to equate that again, there, substitute what you had sold, the market clearing price, to these values there. So if you're going to substitute it, 36 minus 5 times 3 is equivalent to 12 plus 3 times 3. So in that case, 36 minus 15 is 21, and 12 plus 9 is equivalent to 25. So the market equilibrium quantity is considered to be 21 units with a market clearing price of 3 pesos. So what is the market equilibrium point or market equilibrium position? That is this one. At price 3 and quantity 21 is considered to be the market equilibrium point. There, that's how to solve it. Now, in a certain market equilibrium, we could actually have a market disequilibrium. Yun talaga actually ang meron sa ating reality. When it comes to reality speaking, that is what we always encounter because of the opposite behavior of the demanders and the supply. Now, this equilibrium happens because of the many factors that actually we encounter in the economy. And because of this, we experience what we call the market failure, which is actually, sabi nga dito, inevitable. Because we cannot avoid it, but actually we could minimize it and control it. Okay? Yan. So, what are this market equilibrium? In terms of a market, we could actually obtain two. We have the surplus here, and then the other one is the shortage. So, when does a surplus happens? Now, by having the by having the graph there, and having the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, a market surplus happens when a quantity supply is greater than quantity demand. That means there are too many products that are available in the market, but the demanders are not buying. They are controlling their buying behavior. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng surplus. Many would say it is because suppliers are supplying more and more. They're producing more and more. But if you're going to look at the side of the supplier, you would say they never change their production. It just so happens that there are too many products in the sense that the demanders are controlling their consumption behavior. Okay? There are many reasons actually why do we have to control our consumption behavior. Maybe we are saving a portion of our income too much, or maybe we want to use something out of our income, or it is because the prices in the market are very high. That's why we are, what do you call this one, minimizing our, what do you call this one, our buying behavior. Okay, there's when does that happens here? It happens when a price there, if the price here, it happens when a price is higher than the equilibrium. Okay, pag nagkakaroon ng surplus, it would also result to this situation. So there are two ways how to see to it the surplus. Pwedeng merong surplus kasi po yung presyo ay masyadong mataas. Okay? Kaya hindi kayang bilhin ng mga demanders ng mga product. Or on the other side, we could say that there is a surplus because the consumers are, what you call this one, controlling their buying behavior. So in that case, what will happen? It will create this case. It will create a higher price pag meron tayong surplus. Pag higher price, what is the effect? You could say that there, the supply is too much. Andito siyang portion. While the demand is on this one. Diba? There. So in this case, the difference between this and among within the center of it, you could say that there is a disequilibrium because we know that this is already the uh, equilibrium quantity, and yet the supply that is being available in the market is this one, and the demand are just wanting to buy this value. So that means meron tayong unsold dito. So ano mangyayari if we have many two products that are unsold? Okay? If you are a producer, what will happen to your product? If you're going to stock them, you could say na pwedeng investment yan sooner. Pag maraming unsold na product, ang gawin natin is pwede natin silang i-inventory, ibenta natin sila bukas, i-add natin sa mga iba pa, and therefore, we could actually earn more. But if that situation happens and happens by piling and piling and piling more, that means malulugi ka as a certain producer. So therefore, you have to make a way. So in that case, if there are too much unsold products already on your own storage rooms, then ang gagawin mo dun is you have to dispose them. Because you cannot produce and produce more, what will happen to those products that were not being sold out? So ang gawin mo is i-dispose mo sila. How are you going to dispose them? Then that means you have to lower the prices. Okay? If there are too much surplus or too much unsold product, then ang gagawin natin is we have to lower the price so that we could sold those unsold products. Okay? Are there any ways to do that? Of course, it's just simply by making a sale, yung mga marketing strategies na buy one take one, they would do that, or they have to advertise by means of there is a sale during that point, 70% off, 50% off, yung mga ganyan. Okay? But at a certain point, if there are surpluses in the market, there are some people who are going to take advantage of that. Yung parang may isang supplier or may isang demander na pwedeng bilhin lahat yung mga unsold products. Itago, tapos ibenta sa black market. Okay? So that would be a certain kind of a problem. Okay? But that is very rare. Another one is that if some people would do that, ang gagawin din pala ng ibang tao is that they could actually obtain those surplus product and sell them in a very, very low products. Kaya meron tayong mga tinatawag natin mga wagwag. Please mind the essence of our wagwag because wagwag somehow are very expensive compared to the products that we buy in a what do you call this one? Established business, okay, such that Center Mall or such as Chongsan, such as that SM, okay? Parang in the concept supposedly of a wagwag or yung mga tinatawag natin na mga surplus stores, these are the different stores where you could actually buy products at a very low price. Okay, so that will be the effect of the surplus. Now, next is we have to go with the shortage itself. Now, a shortage happens naman if we have what we call the situation wherein a price will become lower than that of the market clearing price itself. Now, look at this one. If the price is lower, then what will be the effect? Here, quantity supply will be at that level, and the quantity demand will be at that level. So, in that case, quantity supply is, for this one, quantity supply is considered to be less than quantity demand itself. That means there are too low or very small amount of goods that are available in the market, and yet the demanders are willing to buy more. Okay, they are willing to buy more in that cases. So with this one, ano ang gagawin natin when it comes to shortages? How do we solve the shortage? Because if this will happen, many people will actually become or will be starving more or will become poorer. Kasi there are some demanders who would actually afford to buy this one, diba? That's why we have the rich people, the elite people. Those rich or elite people, they could actually buy all the supply and consume them by themselves. And then the rest will have to starve more. Dito nga, in here, ito lang yung supply, so this is the amount of the people who are starving. So, if one person will have to buy this, then more fortunately, marami rin mag-starve sa kanila. So, for us to escape this kind of problem is we have to increase the prices. Since ang dami namang mga demanders ang gustong bumili ng product, then why not mag-produce tayo ng marami? Pero kailangan nating itaas yung presyo. Ganon. Diba? So, as a producer, we have to behave that one. Pwede naman ako mag-produce or magbenta ng maraming product, pero expect the prices to be higher. So, in that case, if they're going to do that, then the quantity supply will have to reach up to this level again. And then the demanders will have to decrease their buying behavior or control their buying behavior up to this level ulit. So, we will have to obtain your equilibrium. Diba? Ganyan po ang ating tinatawag natin na how to solve this one. Dito, rampant ang tinatawag natin na operation ng black market dito. Kasi ang black market could be a possible na pwedeng lower prices or surplus market. At saka yung mga black market pwede naman pong higher prices. Why? Dito, if one person is rich enough to buy all the products here, pwede niyang kunin yun, ibenta sa black market at a higher price since ang mga demanders naman kailangan nila yun because they're starving so they have to buy it. Diba? So, very rampant ang black market in terms of shortages. That's why, most probably, yung mga market, they are avoiding this one. But if the shortage and the surplus cannot be avoided by or cannot be solved by the suppliers and the demander, that is already the reason na papasok yung makikialam yung gobyerno. Kahit na hindi naman siya talaga pwede makialam ang gobyerno when it comes to the movement sa ating market. That is within their grasp already. Wala yun sa kanilang forte. But if they cannot already control, the suppliers and the demanders cannot control the problem of shortage and surplus, papasok si government. And they're going to implement what we call the price ceiling and then the price floor. The price ceiling, it is the highest price. while the price floor is the lowest price. Now, these two situations happen only at a certain level. If you remember the time na nagkaroon tayo ng too much red tide, yung oil spill, ng mga panahon yun, nagkaroon tayo ng price control by the price ceiling and the price floor. By means of the government, they implement the price ceiling na kung saan, ito yung maximum price na pwede nating implement. Kasi maraming nagtataasan yung presyo ng mga milk fish noon. So therefore, they have to control it by means of implementing price ceiling. Another one is yung mga renta. This price ceiling is applicable sa mga renta kasi some tenants would have to increase the rents of their own tenants nga, some of those what do you call this one, yung mga nagpaparenta ang nagtataas ng renta ng kanilang mga tenants. So in that case, the government have to control it by putting up a price ceiling. Price floor happens at a very rare case kasi nga gusto nila, if possible, gusto nilang iwasan ito. But if you are a producer, I will always prefer a price ceiling. While the consumer will always prefer a price ceiling. Producer will always want a price floor and then the consumer will always want a price ceiling. Why so? Tingnan natin. A price ceiling kasi happens here, below the equilibrium. That is the price ceiling. While the price floor happens above equilibrium. Okay? Ito dapat yung pinakamababang presyo. So, pag ikaw ay isang producer, di magpataas ka ng presyo. Papunta ka doon. So, mas gusto mo yung price floor, di ba? Pag ikaw ay consumer, mas gusto mo ito. Kasi yung mga producer, hindi na sila pwedeng magpataas dito. But actually, they have to decrease their prices below there. So, consumer, gusto nila to. They are actually benefited on the price ceiling. While the price floor, mga producers natin ang benefited. Okay? So, here. So, we have the same, we have a example. Quantity demand and a quantity supply function, wherein the equilibrium price is 3 and then the equilibrium quantity is 21. Ngayon, what if due to economic situation, the price increases to 5 pesos? What is the market situation? Remember, tumaas ang prices. So, automatically, it will create a surplus. Diba? It will create a surplus. But how much or what is the value? Ganyan po. So, the quantity demand is 11 and the quantity supply is 27. That means there are too much supply in the market because of the too much high in the prices. Yung mas gusto mo. Pero ang problema, hindi natin mabebenta yon because the demanders will only buy 11. Okay? Now, if the price will become 1 peso, that is lower than the equilibrium. Right? So therefore, you're going to create a shortage. The suppliers will never want to produce or sell at a lower prices. So therefore, it will create a shortage itself. Quantity demand is greater than that of your quantity supply. Okay? So in this case, thank you for understanding our discussion. It is just a surplus, and in general, surplus situation, demanders are satisfied, suppliers are on the losing side. On the shortage situation, demanders are on the losing side, while the suppliers are on the satisfied side. Okay, so therefore, in a certain market, remember, market equilibrium is very important, but it's hard to obtain it. Therefore, there must be a interaction between what we call the demanders and then the suppliers itself. Okay, so that is all for our discussion, and hopefully you understood them. Thank you and good luck.